Good morning, Quint. Welcome to my podcast, One for the Road. It's an absolute delight to have you on. How are you today?
Morning, Dave. Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm in sunny Germany at the moment, on a bit of work and a bit of pleasure, and it's a glorious day here. Thanks.
And you've got a lovely backdrop there. It looks really beautiful.
Is it? Is it?
Oh yeah, it's green. It's green. So, and you've got a lovely shirt on. I've already commented on that before we started. So it's my kind of style, that is. But I appreciate you coming on. And the reason I asked you is because I found your work on Instagram and your incredible animations, which we can talk about later on. But they really hit me hard, actually, because they're so accurate. And I spoke to you as well, and you've got a fascinating story. So I thought I'd get you on and you could share with the listeners. And it generally starts back from when you grew up and where and what started your drinking, really, if you don't mind me starting there.
Well, I'll give it a go. It's the origin story of the drinking is always a little bit of a mix, isn't it, with genetics and nature and nurture and all of that. I think it's probably a sober person's part of their quest is, and understandably, is to try and find out what the origins of it all were. But I'll give it a go, Dave. Yeah. So my name is Quint Boa. It's an unusual name, and part of that is because my father was a Canadian. His name was Bruce Boa. And he was an actor. He passed away in 2004. He was an actor who was in Fawlty Towers. He was the American who wanted a Waldorf salad in Fawlty Towers. He was in Full Metal Jacket. He was in Octopussy. He was in Empire Strikes Back. But I digress. We'll go back to the beginning. So I was born in 1962. My father and mother bought a house in Kew in Richmond, sort of just outside of Richmond in London, Greater London, which was the family home. And I was raised there till I was about 19 years old. And it was a pretty tricky environment. I mean, outside looking in, you'd think it was all roses, but it really wasn't. Like so many families, I think the family dynamic was very erratic, and it was very tumultuous, in large part because my father was an alcoholic, and he was bedridden a lot of the time. His drink was whiskey. And when he was sober, he was on the very few times where he tried to get sober, I think they lasted for about 1 or 2 weeks. He was just terribly depressed. I mean, we'd say now he was just completely hungover and getting over it. But anyway, so he was a raging alcoholic. He managed to stay sober enough sometimes for jobs. So there were, and in particular, there were 3 jobs which he managed to stay sober to do. One was for Daz Soap. The other one was for Samorit cigarettes, and one was for ski yogurt. And back in the days, which we're talking about the early 60s, you would get paid roughly $3 grand for a commercial. Bearing in mind, a house those days was probably 12 grand. He hit the jackpot basically, and that's how come we got that house. He got sober when I was 7 years old. And from then on, there was a little bit more stability in the home. My mother, when I was 7, had my sister, so she was home because up to that point she was going out to work to support us, because Bruce's money was fairly intermittent, and basically he just bought the house. So it was there's an expression, fur coat, no knickers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had the house. We have bugger all else. I'm not sure how much I can swear on this. So that's where I was up until about 7 years old. Then we grew up. I went to secondary school, comprehensive, and studied there. And then I I dabbled with a bit of marijuana at the time, and I had a really bad effect. I think my kids would probably call it a whitey, and I just had a little freak out on it. And I didn't touch drugs at all from then on in, which is kind of a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I think if I ever got into cocaine or whatever, I think I just would have been lost. But I didn't. But what I did get into was booze. And I had my first drinks when I was about 15, 16 years old. I was doing martial arts at the time. And afterwards, all the guys, I was quite young, and all the guys were obviously too young to drink, really. And the guys afterwards, and men, would go and have a pint or two in the local pub. And that's where I started to drink with them. And straight away from the first few drinks, I felt this sort of sense of ease about myself, and a sense of oh, okay, hail fellow, well met. You know, this is all right. We've trained. We're drinking. It's all right. It was part of the ritual of training was drinking. And then as I got older, drinking became a part of going out with friends into Richmond. And I think really from an early age, I drank to not like my friends who were having a drink. I was drinking to have 3 or 4 pints of, I think it was a beer called ESB at the time, and that's what I drink, those beers. And then I'd start drinking wine, and I met my girlfriend, now wife of some 40 years, there. And I remember she was drinking, she'd have a glass, 2 glasses of wine, and I'd be like on 3 or 4 pints. I wasn't driving, so I could get back on the bus back home. Anyway, that sort of trajectory continued with the drinking. So I mean, it was a daily thing. It was usually about 2 bottles of wine and a pint of and a couple of pints was my sort of daily intake from about 18, 19 years onwards. And so then personally, what I did was I got I didn't go to university. I got an HND in business studies, and with a view to doing something I didn't know what. I didn't have any sort of direction, so I got involved in film extra work. My father was an actor, so I just thought, oh, I could see extras doing extra work, and I thought, I'll do that. So I used to do extra work, and it was really well paid, and it was paid cash as well, Dave. Can you imagine? Cash. Thanks very much, Quint. 20, 40, 60, 80, Oh, it was lovely. And I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and maybe more, maybe 6 years. And it was great because at the time Thatcher had reduced the taxes on film companies in the UK. So if you think back to the 80s, there were an awful lot of films being made, from the big films like Batman, the first Batman's, Henry V, obviously Full Metal Jacket, and a lot of these big movies. And I was an extra on all of them, and a lot of them, when I say an extra, it wasn't just one day, it was maybe as a 2 or 3 week gig. I mean, I remember once I was working on Henry V in the morning, sword fighting at dawn at Shepperton Studios. And then in the evening, that was a bit camp, wasn't it? But anyway.
It's fine.
Shall we more camp? More, yeah. And then I'd get on the M25, go round to Pinewood Studios where they were doing the night shoots for Gotham City. And we do that, and that was, I mean, I was earning, well, in fact, I'll tell you how much I was earning, because that was a deposit for a flat, which I bought in Richmond, of all places, which I bought for 35 grand. This is 1960, 1980, 1982. Imagine that, 35 grand for a, I think, 1-bedroom flat. So I bought that, got out of the home, and that when I got out of that family dynamic, things were like, oh, thank goodness, there wasn't this Bruce wasn't there. He was still, even though he was sober, he was what I think some of us would call a dry drunk. I mean, he was really narcissistic, and he's a physically large man, and I experienced him as being fairly sort of aggressive and overbearing. Although he was as nice as pie. in some situations. And, you know, he was a massive advocate of AA. What he did was I mean, just as a sort of sidebar, he got sober through AA, and he cleaved to AA for the rest of his life. And he became very strong advocate of AA, and was a bit of a Marmite character within AA, because I think when he shared, he kind of stood up and he lectured. I don't know if for you or any of your listeners know those sorts of sharers, where they speak for everyone. You know, we are all here today, and Bill W. said this, and it was a little bit of a sermon. Now, his father was a preacher. Bruce's father was a preacher. So I'm wondering, and I've always wondered, if a part of Bruce got into the spiritual side, God, you know, literally God as an omnipresent, omniscient figure, rather than as an acronym. I mean, I like to think of it as, you know, the great outdoors, or a group of drunks, or a general orderly direction. I mean, he was full on God. And he stayed within AA and all of his life, you know, even on his deathbed, he died of cancer. And he never asked for another drink. And he was very, very supportive of other people who were trying to get sober. Cannot take that away from him. You know, he did a great job there. So with my own story, I got involved in extra work. I bought the flat. I continued doing extra work, and then I got involved in camera work. And I started working at the BBC on light entertainment shows like Top of the Pops, National Lottery, and so forth. I also then got involved personally in doing an MA, a diploma and an MA in psychology. My thesis was on addiction. So I'm sitting there with a glass of red, writing up my thesis on addiction. Shameful. And then whilst I was doing the camera work and I was studying psychology, then I set up my own private practice, where I was dealing with a thing called critical incident debriefing, which is what you'd call now trauma therapy. And I was also doing a little bit with addiction. And then in 2000, it became possible to edit video on computers, and I got a computer, and I got a mini DV camera with which did mini DV tape, and I filmed experiential marketing groups. Basically, it's a highfalutin phrase for boys and girls handing out products, you know, like Actimel or hair products, shampoos. And then I'd do a VHS video. You're too young to remember those, Dave. But basically, it was a video.
Come on.
and we put little metrics on it. You know, what the footfall was, how many got handed out, where they got handed out, and that went to the PR to the marketing agency, to the PR agency, and the PR agency said, "Where are you getting these from? You know, it's from us." So then we started working with the PR agencies. Then we started working with the PR agencies companies, because they liked it as well, and that got us into, you know, for example, we went from Touchdown Promotions to Good Relations to Pan10, and Pan10 was based in Woking, well, Weybridge, just outside of. So while we were doing that, we were making a little bit of money. We needed an office, and we by great good fortune. I mean, this is really quite if you believe in an almighty, this happened. We needed £30,000 to get an office, and we found a cowshed which we could convert. We needed £30,000, and within, I think, a week or two, we got a job filming the restoration of St. Paul's Cathedral for £30,000.
Wow.
And yeah, I know, we just put it down, bought the place, and it was a one and done. We never got any repeat work. It wasn't we did a bad job. That was just what they wanted, and that was it.
Yeah.
But we had our office, and then we just tarted it up. And then, so this gets us to 2007. 2007, the financial crash happened. We were working for a company called Bear Stearns, which is an old American bank. It got gobbled up by JP Morgan, who we still work with to the present day. And then you can really take a line from that. So by now, 2007, we were working with, the team had gone from 2 people to about 5. And we started, we were working in the finance sector, the IT sector, the healthcare sector. And then in 2014, animation came along, and it was possible now to animate 5 different, initially one sort, which is just motion graphics. But then as time went on, you could animate hand-drawn animation like Walt Disney. You could animate stop motion animation like Wallace and Gromit. You could do photorealistic 3D animation like, you know, Toy Story, CGI. And going back to drinking, during that period from year 2000 all the way up to probably 2012, 2013, I was just drinking more and more and more heavily. And basically it was a coolant for me. I was so what you call nowadays a startup. I was so trying to get the startup going, you know, and trying to get money in so that I could pay the staff, so that I could put the next step forward and win this piece of business and win this piece of business and do this edit. And you know, it's red wine, white wine, you know, client lunches, you know, and trying to get the whole thing going. And at the same time, you know, I had 2 kids, which you know, to this day, and I think I speak maybe for a lot of parents, you know, I still, when I do a retrospective, I'm not sure I would give myself a 10 out of 10 for exactly how I was as a father to those kids, who I love dearly. They're with me on holiday here today. I mean, I remember, and I'll take this moment of shame to my grave. On my son's birthday, I was so pissed that I was the labor was taking so long that I lay down on the floor next to where Karen was in labor, and I slept. And so the midwife, when she was delivering, kicked me awake. I woke up just in time to see Finley get born and to cut the cord. And I mean, but the point about that was, how was I drinking? Well, I was on the scooter going to and from the house and going to the offloads on the scooter, pissed while my wife was giving birth to, you know, I just shudder to think, you know, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. But that was part of the course, you know, the drink driving was there a lot. The behavior was always fun. I was a fun drunk. I'll give myself credit for that. I was never aggressive. I wasn't belligerent and never got really into fights. I would just get pissed, and as I got older, we're talking now sort of mid 40s, I get tired, I get sleepy. I was, you know, I'd sort of peak too soon in a social situation, and then start to think, you know, start to keep drinking to try and keep up with it, and I couldn't do it. And then people around me were still making sort of vibrant sort of conversation, and I was like repeating myself and stuff, you know. And then so what happened was, I mean, how I stopped. I mean, I had a few rock bottoms. I mean, I never got caught for drink driving, thank God. I mean, I got stopped and breathalyzed, but miraculously, I was sober when I got stopped. I passed out in a few tricky situations. I had a couple of bad falls, but honestly, I mean, I do think I sort of, in inverted commas, kind of got away with it. I still got my job. I still had my marriage. I still had my kids. I still had my sanity. I still had a clean record, criminal record. And essentially what happened was this is eight years ago, eight and a bit years ago, I was in Richmond Park with some friends, and I just thought, what the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? I've got to stop this. And because I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, I would wake up in the morning, I would have a drink. I would get through the day limping along, trying to keep the whole show on the road, using alcohol as a way to try and keep some equilibrium. But you know, the alcohol, you know, you have a drink at 11 o'clock, by 11:30, you're coming off it. You need another one. You have to keep that buzz going. The amounts are going up and up and up. Things like sleeping were getting ridiculous because I need to wake up to have a drink to carry on sleeping, you know. Thank God I wasn't into drugs, so I wasn't taking any kind of, you know, sedatives in order to get me to sleep. And I just before this podcast, I did a drive to the bakery for the kids, and there was a massive advert up there of advertising beer. This is in Germany. And I just think back, and I feel physically nauseous thinking back to those times of just limping along in life. My quality of life was just awful, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how I could stop. I didn't know how I could carry on. I didn't want to go to AA. This is maybe interesting for some of your listeners. I didn't want to go AA because that's what Bruce was. And I didn't want to be under Bruce's shadow. I didn't want to go into an AA meeting. Oh, you're Bruce's son. No, I didn't want that. And the couple of times I went to an AA meeting, they were talking about flipping their cars or beating their wives or losing their jobs or going to prison. And I thought, well, that never happened to me, so I can't be an alcoholic, right? Straight past old bins on the way home. But somehow I stopped one day, 2 days, and I got to an AA meeting in Richmond, which I still to this day highly recommend it. It's in under the bridge at Richmond upon Thames. It's a fantastic. Have you been there?
I know of it quite well. Yeah.
It's an amazing meeting. It's quite humanist. It's not Bible thumping, and it's actually under the arches. So you have the arches of the bridge. You're in there and we just light a couple of candles and talk. When I went there was probably 4 or 5 people, and now it's probably 30 or something. It's really grown since I've been there. So then what happened, dear listeners, was that I started to really think about what the dynamics of the situation were and how I was going to go forward with this. And I became quite I replaced alcohol with fitness. So I started going to the gym a lot and training, cycling as well. And I white knuckled it for a bit. I didn't do the steps, and I white knuckled it, and was gradually starting to understand. That's the other thing I did. So I studied it. I studied alcohol, and I had some past with this, with psychotherapy and actually with a practice. And I studied alcohol, and I is it an addiction? Is it a disease? Is it a choice? Is it, what's the latest research on it? That's what I did. I got really involved in that and tried to get intellectually get a grip on what the hell is going on with me. But all the time as I was getting sober, after days turned into weeks, turned into months, I was feeling better and better and better. And I started to feel sort of quite repelled by alcohol. I hated what it had done to me. I hated what it had made me. And people were relating to me in a different way. My world was changing, because I was changing who I was and my relationship to myself. And it was having an effect on how people were relating to me, and things started to come out. I thought I was getting away with it. Of course I wasn't getting away with it. I wasn't getting away with, being sober at work. My trying to hide it was putting a bottle of white wine in a cupboard downstairs in the kitchen. I mean, they could smell it on me. How many mints do you have to, have at 11 o'clock in the morning? I wasn't getting away with anything. Who was I kidding? And then, so my kids were relating to me differently. My wife was relating to me differently. I had AA to go to. I had my training, and of course work was there as well. And then I was better at work. I was, there were a lot of firsts. There were a lot of client meetings first, no booze. Some clients fell away because I wasn't, a client meeting wasn't about getting pissed. It was about, just having a laugh, but just not getting drunk, or having a couple of drinks, just not going out on some almighty bender. And what I then did was I then got into animation. I could see what was happening with animation. I could see that things like mobile phones and social media required more and more content. And a lot of that content was quite sort of esoteric. It was a lot of, you know, a lot of medical stuff, a lot of IT stuff was, video couldn't show what it does. I mean, if you try and think about what a mobile phone does, say talks to the cloud, you can't show, like you have a voiceover, that an Apple phone talks to the cloud. Well, you know, what does it do? You know, you'd have a shot of the phone, you'd have a shot of, I don't know, a cloud, and you just pan up. No, with animation, you can have the phone, you can have it, the data traveling backwards and forwards. You can go into the phone, you can show the bit of the phone that talks to the cloud. You know, you can show the features and benefits of that phone in a situation. You know, whether you're on a you know, traveling around at work, or whether you're, you know, so the cost of animation in some cases really became an option for clients. And I kind of went on this mission to explain why animation is really the way forward for a lot of clients. And I still believe that to this day. I mean, I don't think we've even scratched the surface around animation yet. Anyway, and so I introduced animation to our existing clients, and then I'm building out to this day, animation to new clients, because they don't know. People my age think sometimes, especially in this country, in Germany and in Switzerland, often people think that, you know, direct marketing is the latest thing, you know, or PowerPoint is the latest thing. It's not, you know, animation is where it's at. And the sooner that people wake up to that, you know, anyway, this is going off on a evangelical animation thing. This is about booze. But anyway, the point is that I got sober, animation was there, and very quickly that kernel exploded. And now the animation part of the company is probably 5 times larger than the video part of the company. Brexit happened, which meant that we had to open up an office in the Netherlands in order to continue to service our clients in Europe, because they couldn't deal with us in the UK as easily. We opened up an office in New York, which is going great guns now. And then subsequently, only a few months ago now, opened up an office in Los Angeles, and that's doing well too. And, you know, honestly, I put that down to sobriety. I mean, you can look at the promises in AA and go, okay, if I had a magic wand 8 years ago, and I was asked to wave it, what would my dreams be? For the business to be going great, for the marriage to still be intact, for my kids to still, you know, have a relationship with me, for me to be able to drive around with a clean license, you know, that is great. And that's what, and I guess final step in that was that because of COVID, I saw that what was happening in terms of mental health, and using animation. I've done a load of, I've done 10, I think, videos, animations on addiction, on trauma, on depression, on drugs, on anger, and anxiety, and on our relationship to ourselves. And those animations I put up on the understanding page on Shoot You, and there's a link to it on my Instagram at Quint Boa, where you can click that link and either download the videos for your own personal use, or to upload, or to just watch. And please feel free to comment on how they could be better. And those animations have been downloaded thousands of times. The number one animation, or there's 2 big ones. Addiction's in there. There's a good animation on alcoholism and addiction, but the 2 big ones are anxiety and anger. The anger one is there because teachers are downloading it to give to their kids who are acting out some of their anger, especially post-COVID. Now they're back in the classroom, and it's a way of introducing the idea that it wasn't the situation that made you hit your fellow student. It was the fact that at home you're not being listened to as well as you might be. It was the fact you can't actually relate to anybody, or it just opens up a conversation in a much easier way than a teacher sitting down and giving somebody a pamphlet. Kids can relate to animation. I think we all relate to animation in a very different way than we do to real life. The anxiety animation has just exploded. And the and continue, and it's rising. And obviously there's no clues for guessing why. You've got the current sort of economic crisis at home with gas. You know, it's heat or eat. There's the inflation and all the rest of it. And I think if you want to start talking about the roots of alcoholism, I mean, I think part of it is a general anxiety about what is the meaning and purpose of my life, and a large part of that's economic fear as to what's coming down the tracks, and that generates anxiety, and that's another reason why I did the anxiety animation. Again, it's free to air, and it's just personal thoughts written as a psychotherapist.
When I saw your one on addiction, someone actually sent it to me.
Oh,
And
yeah?
said, yeah, wow, Dave, you've got to see this. And I watched it and it blew me away because it was so accurate. And I don't know if you've seen the animation called Nuggets.
No.
That is fantastic. It's simple. It's 5 minutes long, and it's a little bit like the Red Bull advert where alcohol gives you wings. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it starts with this bird walking along this long line, and there's a little golden nugget, and it leans down and takes a
Oh,
sip.
yeah.
Then that one,
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
really,
No,
really
that's
powerful, right?
yeah.
And it
Yeah.
stays with you. And that's with your animations as well. I think because they are so descriptive and short and whatever, and you watch it and you go, oh my God. And what I was going to lead on to say, Quint, is that I haven't said anything in 35 minutes because I haven't wanted to, because your story is so fascinating and articulate. But I relate. I've ticked so many boxes. We're at a very similar age. And I know Richmond really, really well. I know Kew really well, around the corner. And also with the bit you said, you know, you wasn't really into drugs, because whether it's I don't know, I know it's around cocaine and whatever, but I never really got into it, right? And you got to a certain age where you started drinking and peaked, and then thought, oh, I just want to go to bed. That's when people took the old coke and whatever and carried on. With me, I never got into it. So there's so many things that I relate to. And I was thinking about when you said, I was walking around Richmond Park thinking, what am I doing? Imagine if I bumped into you, right? So you're 8 years sober, I'm coming up to 4, right? I was still drinking, and we had a conversation, and you said, you know, I've got a flat in Richmond, or whatever you was doing then, and this business here and that. I would think, God, this guy's got his act together. I wish I was him. Not knowing actually what you, and this is what we say about fur coat, no knickers. We all put this external view on that we're all right, but inside, so many people are actually not, because we hide this terrible addiction through shame. And you know, we put on our nice shirts and put our fish products in our hair, and we go to work, right? And we're like, hi, you know, actually underneath we're quite broken, you know, because of this awful addiction we got. So
that's what I'm you know, getting a bit teary when you say things like that, Dave. You know, because the curative part of talking about it with a fellow person is that if you wrote a transcript of your experiences, I could read it and I go, that's me. I could have written that. I can give that piece of paper, that transcript, to anybody in an AA meeting, or probably anybody listening to this today, and they'd read that and they'd chime with it. Something would be there.
yeah.
And I don't know what the hell that is, right? I don't know why this, whatever this is, hit us, it hit me anyway. I don't talk for everyone, but it's so tangible, and it's so powerful, right? But the curative part of it is that recognition. Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah.
I can see you. You can see me. And there's a track, there's a Johnny Cash song called "The Beast in Me," which is, for me, it's that's the ultimate song on booze. But it's that recognition in other people who've got the same situation, that they see it in me, I see it in them, and it's like just a relief.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't understand it.
No.
My wife doesn't understand it. My kids don't get it, but you get it. Other people hopefully will get it. And it's that keeps us on the straight and narrow.
Like, I'm a coach, so when someone comes on for their first session, right, and they start talking, 9 times out of 10, they start crying because they know I understand. And it's like you coming to me and saying, "Oh, Dave, I've just bet my whole week's salary on bloody Blind Bear, the horse on the Derby, and I've lost everything." And I'll be like, "What? Why would you do that?" I don't get it, But if you said to me, "I've just downed a bottle of bloody wine before work and I'm going to drive," it's like I totally hear you. And that's the difference. And I'm like you as well, right? So I've written a couple of things down here about how you got into your cycling when you stopped. And that's what I did. I just threw myself into sport, right? I also started educating myself around the science of it because I'm real nosy, right, about myself. And I really wanted to know, like, I had a childhood trauma when I was 14. I wasn't in the crowd at school. I was pretty quiet and insular, and all of a sudden I started getting into the in crowd. They accepted me. So where I was rejected at 14, I was then accepted, but into the wrong crowd, right? So I was up the shops drinking, and they were getting into fights, but I was known as the drinker. That was my role, my acting role. And it carried on, and then that become my persona of the drinker. Like that was my name, like in Usual Suspects, Mr. Black, Mr. Pink, and I was Mr. Drinker, and that carried on throughout my life until I started not going out, and I was left with myself on my own drinking. And I used to drink to blackout because I had collaborated all these thoughts throughout my life, and they become so overwhelming that the only way of turning that volume button down was by blacking out.
Yeah, definitely.
So I got to a place like you, walking a pivotal part, like where you was walking in Richmond Park, like whatever you believe in up there, the greater power, looked down at me and said, "Dave, mate, if you don't sort this out now, you're going elsewhere." It was like that voice. And I mean, I could talk to you for hours about the model of disease and what, that fascinates me, all that business and that. And we haven't got time to get into that. But it's fascinating how we're a similar age. We come from a similar area and we're walking the same path. We haven't met each other throughout our whole life. And this is the first time we met on this podcast. And I feel like I've known you for years already.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, psychically, we're fellow pilgrims, right? I mean, whatever the initiating factors were and the accelerants, we got to a point, we had a course correction, and here we are. And part of it is like, what the hell just happened? What was that all about? I mean, I look back at some of my behavior and go, why did you do that? What was the sense in that? Didn't you work out the risks involved in, and then another, and then, but that's, if there's, from that, I like to think that having gone through that and having the humility around it, I can then listen to someone else's story if they're still drinking or if they've just stopped drinking and say, hey, look, you know what? There is an alternative. However black it seems, however awful it looks, if you just can address this one thing, you've got a shot. I paid my dues. I feel I have something to say on that subject, and not say it in a, I managed to do it, say it in a humble, empathic way, and that hopefully, 1 in 5 people will maybe take something from it and, change their life and the life of those other people's around them.
But
because
that's why I do this, Quint, because the
yeah,
amount of people that say, do you know what, I listened to blah blah's podcast and it really, there was something, it's like planting a seed. You just plant that seed and it makes people stop and think, I can really relate to that, and that
mm,
and that grows within them, and then they start to ask themselves questions. And this is the power of these podcasts, is that they're all relatable. Our life
mm,
stories, like I'm relating to you throughout this whole podcast. It's like, God, yeah, that was me. That was me. And interesting to say about that AA thing in Richmond. I've been told about that one a few times, but my experience of AA was right at the beginning, because I didn't really
oh
know
yeah,
what else there was.
yeah,
I hadn't really looked into it, and someone said to me, "Look, why don't you come with me to this AA meeting, right?" And I went there, but I love churches as well, so the ambience of walking in this place was like, "Oh my God, this is incredible! I love it here," and people getting up and telling their stories. Week 2, week 3, week 4, it's like the same people getting up and saying the same stories. Um, and then one day I mentioned I was going camping and I was going to take a couple of Heineken Zeros with me. And
oh yeah,
they all jumped on me, and I felt really, really like, oh, what's this? It was like, I'm not comfortable.
really,
Yeah, because they, understandably, for some the old alcohol-free drinks, if they're triggering, they stay away. But I was okay with them at the time,
mm,
and I felt a bit pressurized. And when I left there, I thought, I want to go to the bloody pub. So I started then getting into the social media side and whatever. And then I had quite a poor view of AA through my own experience. And
yeah,
now, coming up to 4 years, I'm going to start going to some meetings again, because I'm more open-minded. And the way I look at it is, I mentioned your shirt earlier, right? And most of these viewers won't see it, but it's a lovely color purple with a lovely design on it, right? And a very handsome
yeah.
man wearing it, right?
Bless you.
And but my attitudes change. That we're going to go shopping, right? When you get back from Germany, and you're going to go into shop and say, "Oh, what do you think?" I'll say, "It's not quite for me," and then I'll take you into mine. It's not quite for me, and that's how it works with sobriety. You've got to find what works for you, because it's not one size fits all, I think. And whether it's online groups, real life meetings, AA, smart recovery, coaching. There's so
Mm,
many opportunities out there now where there
mm,
weren't in the days of Bruce, where
mm,
it's that or nothing, and
mm,
I just think there's so many opportunities out there now which suit different people, especially after lockdown, that
yeah,
drinking's increased incredibly.
yeah, yeah. I didn't realize that there was, like, for example, anything other than AA. Really, I
Mm,
didn't bother to look until Instagram, till I kind of got quite busy on Instagram with the company. And then when I started doing the animations, I set up my own Instagram account and put the animations on there. And I was amazed. I've met some fantastic people on Instagram, and that's great, because I think a lot of people with AA, and with good reason, a lot of it is Bible thumping, and the group that I'm with, and I've been to others in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, and it's humanitarian. It's the we are this is it's the human condition. The human condition is such that if you put in a shit ton of advertising around booze, you can easily get seduced, and it can easily become a nice thing to try once in a while, and that can slip in with certain preconditions, which are as varied as there are people, can lead into an addictive behavior, which can have catastrophic consequences
mm,
for them, that person, and the people around them. Um, and I think, I mean, if we go back to Amsterdam, and for example, you'll like this story. So I wanted to go to an AA meeting in Amsterdam, and I Googled it on my phone, and there was the address. So I got on my bicycle and I cycled, and there was this big building, and I rang on the doorbell, and hello, and I said, "Hello, is this Sober Sunrise?" No, this is the Dutch royal family's residence.
Oh my
I
God.
said, did they have a drink problem? No, they do not have a drink problem. You're looking for Alcoholics Anonymous. We get this all the time. It's down the road. So I go down the road, and there's two girls and two guys sitting outside this house, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I say, you guys friends of Bill? In English, oh, they laughed at that. They thought, oh yeah, we're all friends of Bill, and into an AA meeting, but and I talked to them about AA there, and I said, where have you, what's the score here? And they said, well, it's a disease. It's a disease. If you have a disease, you go to the GP signs you off as being an addict, and you get a chunk of money to maintain your rent and everything else. Over here, oh, I know, let's keep it in the air. Let's call it a disease. Let's call it a choice. Let's not actually underwrite any of this. Let's not actually be proactive at helping, And when you look at CAMS now, with children and young adults, you look at the National Health Service for mental health, it's a comorbidity addiction to so many things. And what's being done about it? Sweet FA, there's just my animations, your podcast, and voluntary groups.
Yeah.
And is it spoken about? No. There was a guy said to me the other day, there was a show on TV where everybody put on a post-it note the mental illness they suffered from. It was to raise mental awareness. Depression, OCD, anorexia. How many alcoholics? None, not one.
Yeah.
The stigma around alcoholism is still there.
Yeah, it is. And the COA have had their funding completely cut. Children of alcoholics,
Really?
Yeah. And you say about alcoholics, it's I was asked to do a talk for Barclays Bank, right? And they didn't identify alcoholism as a problem in the workplace.
Right. Okay.
So
right.
They weren't really keen on the conversation, but a friend of mine kept going and going and going. So we had the conversation around grey area drinking. And we had the conversation, and the amount of anonymous emails that came in, like, oh my God, that is so me, I need support and whatever.
Yeah.
It's 2022.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, come on, let's sort this out. It's crazy. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I think, yes. If you've got a multinational organization with 100,000 employees, you got 1 in 10 functioning alcoholics, and if those alcoholics are working from home, it's starting to become a bit of a gray area now about where the employer's responsibility lies. They don't want to acknowledge the fact that they could be or have a duty of care to people who are, for example, in lockdown in Shanghai for the last, 16 months. They don't want to take responsibility. I mean, I don't want to say on air, but there was a bank just 6 weeks ago. If you Google it, the employee worked from home. He went from his bedroom to the computer, fell over, broke his leg, and claimed on the bank's insurance.
Wow.
So I think there's going to be a real wake-up call where banks will start to see, they're going to dress it up like it's going to be a green thing to do, right? Like banks paying in America, paying for female employees to go to the next state to have an abortion. They're going to say, we have a duty of care to our employees, and we are going to start creating portals which have mental health, and that's going to include addiction. And on the slide, they're going to be thinking, we're going to tell our managers how to spot addiction and try and catch people out with a view to helping them, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because it's there.
It's massive, honestly. And, talking about lockdown, I know you did animation about lockdown, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's called COVID. And the amount of people I talked to that their drinking escalated from, and what that made me think of, and probably you as well, is how would I have dealt with?
Mate, I would have been gone. I would have been gone. I could not have got through it. I mean, what's the point? No one's going to see if I've got a bottle of wine next to the computer. No one. I'm going to get away. I'm scot-free.
My thing is even worse. Like the way I thought of it, how would I get the quantity in the house? Because everything was shut. that's where I come from. And it was like, well, when the shops were open, I could smuggle it in, hide it in the van, hide it under the bed and whatever. But it would be like, Jesus, I'm panicking here, because luckily I was sober when it hit. I was a year sober. I think it was 2020, wasn't it? It started lockdown, and I was just over a year then. And that, do you know what? That wasn't really a challenge for me. I felt quite safe in that environment of lockdown, but the amount of people I talked to where they were going on Zoom meetings with a mug of tea, but it's actually a mug of wine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
But look, mate, we're coming to the close. It's been brilliant. What are you doing with your animations? What's coming up now for you?
So I'm taking those animations. I'm trying to promote them, the little time I've got to promote them. I'm trying to re-edit them, bring in the feedback that I'm getting from people in, which is very easy to do. I do the voiceovers on it. So I just redo the voiceover. I'm watching very closely our current clients who are in banking and IT and tech to see where their HR policies are going, because a lot of these companies now have got well-being, and I think it's a hop, skip, and a jump from having a well-being Friday to actually having some resources there for people, and I want to be part of that. That's what puts the wind in my sails, Dave. I mean, corporate communications is all well and good. Sales, marketing, promotion, video and animation, great. But if I can start generating healthcare videos, if I can start getting mental health out there on the agenda through animation, which I think is the most fantastic resource, animation, I love it. Then that's really gonna float my boat. And that's not like it's a messianic thing. I just think it really needs to be done. I think there's enough around now. Say you went on an intellectual quest as well. There's enough around now where we can make an informed choice. We know what, maybe we don't know what maybe the levels of the variables are. We know the variables. We know the genetics. We know the nature versus nurture. We know the way alcohol affects the prefrontal cortex. We know about GABA. We know about dopamine, serotonin, cortisol. We know all this stuff. I think we're on the frontiers of really getting medically into why this happens, and while I'm not sure we're going to be able to find a cure, at least we're going to put a little bit of light on it so that people can make an informed choice about whether or not they want to do it, in conjunction with the fact podcasts like yours raise awareness, and maybe people will think I can have this next drink, or this can be day one, and from day one it just follows. And honest to God, if there's anybody out there wondering, just it's worth doing. You get your life back, and you get back on track.
Amen, mate, to that. And what I was going to say was, I've got a talk in a college next month, right? And I've already done one there before. So there was 400 students, and the afternoon one was sports students. And I used to play a lot of good standard football. And the way I hit them was that you don't have to get drunk to enjoy yourself and think of your fitness and stuff. And it worked, right? But I'm already thinking of putting it on my PowerPoint, your addiction animation. So I think that will hit all ages, and I think it's powerful. And without you knowing as well, I've quite often shared it with my clients as well. And they've come back to me and said, oh, that is fantastic. So there's a little bit of credit for you there, because I think what you're doing is incredible.
Thank you.
And I've really, really loved recording this with you. You're a lovely man, I can tell. And the work you're doing and your story's been fascinating. So thank you so much for joining me, Quint.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to listeners for listening. I hope it chimed with them, and God bless. What did Dave Allen used to say? May your God go with you.
Yeah, yeah, he did. A lot of people might know about Dave Allen. I do, though, because we're the same age. It's been really fascinating, mate. And when this goes out, I'll make sure the links to your page are on there as well, so they can come and find you out and whatever.
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
Spread the word. Thank you so much, Quint.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you so much.
See you later, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.